Does Alexa live up to the hype? Existing work has identified mass media's expectations when it comes to voice technology for older adults. In this paper, we present a study that compares those expectations to the hands-on experiences of older adults opening a smart speaker for the first time. We do this to better understand the interplay between expectations and experiences on older adults' acceptance of voice interfaces. This paper was the work of myself, JC Sin, and my co-authors Dongchun Chen, Jelena Threat, Anna Gorham, and Cosmin Munteanu at the University of Toronto. Voice technologies are often marketed as being more useful and accessible for people like older adults due to being more natural and easy to use. However, these interfaces may not be as widely adopted by older adults as they could or should be due to the design of these interfaces. Often, it is because, as designers, we're focusing too much on functionality and engineering considerations, and not enough on socio-technical factors that are important to older adults, such as the context of use of these devices, when older adults want to use them, and how they want to be in control of the devices. These are aspects of the design that when we build for the mass market may not be relevant for other age groups, but are very important to older adults. The media plays a large role in these expectations, from putting forth narratives about the social support needed to use voice-based interactions, whether or not voice technology can meet older adults' needs, and how integrated voice interfaces can be with key services such as public health. These narratives set expectations about the suitability of voice technologies for older adults. If these expectations are not met, older adults may become frustrated with technology or feel further excluded, which can lead to greater social consequences, digital marginalization, and the loss in social capital and connections. In order to study the interplay between socio-technical expectations of design with experiences, we ran a study with the aim of finding out how older adults' perceptions of voice technologies related to mass media messaging compared to their experiences with these technologies. Specifically, we conducted a study to find out what are older adults' perceptions of voice interfaces compared to mass media messaging before and after having hands-on experience using them. To answer this question, we first started by asking older adult participants to read 5 news articles about voice technologies. These articles totaled to approximately 30 minutes of reading time and covered topics including general information about smart speakers, how to set one up, benefits of voice technology, how to choose a smart speaker, and how smart speakers have been used in healthcare and to address loneliness. These articles aim to touch upon each of the 4 themes discussed by mass media messaging on voice technology as identified in a previous paper. Then, in a pre-deployment interview, we asked each participant about their thoughts on themes in the articles. This was done over a semi-structured interview over a video call that lasted between 1 and 1.5 hours. During the session, participants were asked for demographic information, their previous experiences with smart speakers, their relationship with the mass media and news, their impressions of smart speakers based on the news articles they read, and their perceptions of smart speakers in relation to the 4 major themes covered by mass media on voice interfaces. Next, participants were given an Amazon Echo Dot to try out for 2 weeks. They were asked to set up the Echo Dot, which involved connecting it to power and to Wi-Fi. They were permitted to ask for assistance from family members and from the researchers during the check-in session, where we inquired about their experiences and preliminary thoughts about the smart speaker so far. After 2 weeks, we conducted a second interview that lasted between 1 and 1.5 hours. During this final session, participants were asked for their thoughts on themes from the articles again, now that they've tried the Amazon Alexa. All of the sessions with participants were audio recorded, transcribed, and systematically coded using inductive thematic analysis. Initial coding and clustering of the codes were conducted by 2 of the researchers that attended the respective interview session, with each of the researchers working independently. Once all of the data was coded and the initial clusters created, a data session between the 2 researchers and additional researchers took place. In the session, the researchers closely reviewed the coding, and initial themes for each session were generated. These themes were further refined by the initial data coders in order to identify overarching, high-level themes among all of the codes across all of the sessions. 4 high-level themes were identified. These themes pertain to areas in which older adults' socio-technical expectations of voice interfaces did not match with their experiences. These themes, or gaps, were centered around expectations of how advanced or primitive voice technology would be, the number of shortcomings that this technology would have, the amount of prerequisites needed to make full use of voice interfaces, and perceived intentions of the content sources behind voice interfaces. Firstly, we discovered that the participants found voice technologies to be more primitive than they expected. On one hand, voice technologies were found to be acceptable for simple tasks such as looking at the weather, setting up timers and reminders, and looking up trivia. However, after having hands-on experience, participants did not perceive voice interfaces to be able to meet their initial expectations for serious tasks, such as conducting deep research, querying for health information, and connecting with government services. Some of the limits to participants' impressions to take voice interfaces seriously were through its limited communication abilities. In fact, older adults want more ability in their voice interfaces. One participant remarked that if Alexa was a pet, it would be more like a goldfish than a puppy to them, hinting that Alexa still had plenty of room to improve in terms of its intelligence, capabilities, and usefulness. As it turned out, older adults wanted voice technologies to not necessarily be simpler, which is the direction that design often takes when it comes to voice technologies for older adults. Secondly, our participants found voice technologies to have more shortcomings than they had expected based on media interpretations. One participant captured these shortcomings after trying out Alexa for themselves when they said, "They're not going to tell you that it doesn't give you the right answers, that it doesn't have good sources. It's not going to tell you that if you want something on Alexa, you gotta pay extra. Or if you want to do something, you gotta go back to the app and do it on the app. You can't do that through there." In other words, as it turned out, contrary to expectations, common existing voice interfaces are not yet placed in contexts where they can be used in isolation without having to rely on extra payment or a separate device to make use of them, which is a barrier to older adults' full use of voice-activated devices. Third, our older adult participants found that they were faced with more prerequisites than they expected to make full use of voice interfaces. In their experience with the devices, older adults found barriers to include subscription requirements, such as paywalls for Amazon Music, difficult setup procedures, lack of guidance, and lack of pervasiveness of voice technologies. One participant pointed out, "One thing I find annoying about new technological gadgets is that they don't give you any information. They expect you to go to the internet and look it up." This suggested that older adults felt a need to seek external help to use their voice device. As it turns out, despite voice technologies being marketed as intuitive, older adults found that these devices were difficult to set up, that there was not enough guidance on how to use them, and that they were hard to use fully. Finally, participants found that they did not expect the large marketing focus of the sources behind the voice interfaces, specifically in terms of the number of advertisements and paywalls for services they wished to use. After experiencing Alexa for themselves, some participants began to perceive the Alexa as a tool to sell users on other Amazon products and services, and mentioned that they were being discouraged from continuing to use the device. One participant described Alexa as being pushy because it wanted them to sign up for something when they hadn't even had an experience of listening, when referring to the Amazon Music subscription service. So, what does this all mean? Even if the mass media does not have direct influence on older adults' expectations and perceptions of voice interfaces, the media may still be a reflection of societal and commercial interests that drive voice interface adoption by older adults. In this paper, we report the findings of a study on older adults' perceptions of voice interfaces in comparison to their expectations based on media messaging. After participants read mass media articles on voice interfaces, they were queried for their opinions on voice interfaces, both before and after trying out the Amazon Echo Dot. What we found were differences between older adults' expectations from news media about voice interfaces and what they experienced when trying out a voice device themselves. Namely, our analysis revealed that voice interfaces were found to be more primitive than expected, that there were more limitations to voice interfaces than expected, more prerequisites were required to make use of voice devices, and that there was a surprise when it came to the perceived intentions of the organizations behind commercially available voice devices. These gaps between expectations and experiences may become barriers for older adults' willingness to adopt voice-based devices. As such, our findings suggest an issue of managing disconnects between the technical capabilities of voice devices and the narrative that informs the expectations. Thank you for your attention, and for more details, please check out our paper available on the ACM Digital Library.